everybody hear me okay? Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I'm Rachel. I'm from Frontline and I shall put my slideshow on in a second. But just beforehand, I just wanted to make it clear that this is a relaxed event. So please feel free, even though we're sitting quite staring at a computer, to move if you need to. You know, if you need to stand up or have a shake or just to move, don't sit on being uncomfortable, basically. So just wanted to say that out loud to you, to give you permission if that's what you need to have to do that. I'm offering this morning some of my experience and over the last 20 years, and it is my experience, and it can differ for different people, and so just be mindful of that. I suppose when we're working, trying to make everything accessible, it's all about lots of different people have got different needs and different requirements, and it's always best to ask. Some things cross over, but some things are really unique and different. So it's all, we're learning all the time, and meeting new people and engaging with different people is always enriching and develops all that we do all the time. I do have a couple of health conditions that I manage, and one of them sometimes means that I struggle putting sentences together. It doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes they can be a little bit mixed up, and I can also say the wrong word. So if anything sounds a little bit, "Ooh, what did you just say?" make a note of it, and I'm more than happy to clarify. And sometimes I don't always know it's happening. But yeah, I just wanted to be quite open and transparent with you. So please feel free. I'm very happy to clarify. I won't be offended if you think, what did you just say then? I didn't understand. And also, in terms of my own personal experience, I'm also a mum of a child with a learning disabilities, and I've been doing this for like well over 20 years. So if there is anything at the end of the session that you wanted to ask and we had time, if Paul thought it was appropriate, and if we did have time to do it, then I'm more than happy to answer any questions that might not be directly related to relaxed events, if that's okay. All right, so I shall start and introduce myself a little bit more. I'm just going to share my screen and start a slideshow. I've got a couple of videos as well. I will be quite mindful of how fast I talk so people can process, but hopefully the visuals will help. Okay, so I'm Rachel. This is Access Coventry, and we're in a relaxed events session. Okay, so a little bit of background of me. I trained at the Northern School of Contemporary Dance in Leeds, graduating in 1998. So my thing is contemporary dance, and I trained to be a professional dancer. I've always been interested in integrated dance and creating and performing professional work with disabled and non-disabled dancers. So that's what I've always done since graduating, and it led to me forming Frontlinedance with my co-founder and fellow dancer Michael King in 2000. So while setting up Frontlinedance, I just think it's also worth knowing that I was a PA for people with spinal cord injuries, and I worked a lot with people with different disabilities and health conditions outside of the arts. And I had some work experience since the age of 15 working in Camp Hills and in special schools. Our work initially toured regionally and nationally, and they were mainly my own works that I created, but then I started to lead and facilitate workshops and residencies, which developed to me working in elderly care, special schools, mental health, and hospitals. My focus has always been inclusive dance and seeing how dance can be made enjoyable and inclusive for all, for everybody. And part of that was me delivering training to non-dance professionals, so those who had no background in dance or not necessarily an interest in dance, and that could be teachers, carers, and health professionals, which has always been quite difficult and quite hard to do, but in having a really strong belief in what I do really has helped to communicate that the need and how much it can be enjoyed by everybody. This grew to us performing work in non-conventional theatre settings. So you'll find us more outdoors, in hospitals, in community centres and in schools rather than a traditional theatre. And within all of this, I'm managing a range of health conditions. And so all of this informs my knowledge and informs my practice. So I just thought it's quite a good idea to let you know where I'm coming from with what I'm saying, really, and to help perhaps put some things into context. So that's a picture of me in a hospital using our sensory bags that we use all the time in our workshops. So what does Frontline Dance do? So we're a bit disability focused dance company based in Stoke-on-Trent, the one that didn't get City of Culture. Lucky Coventry. We turned 20 on the 30th of November. So we've done loads of different things, evolving, being resilient over the last 20 years, adapting and changing as we need to. And we now focus on 3 strands, which is in working in the community, working in health, and our performance work. So our performance work for community and health participants, as well as our professionals, always integrated disabled and non-disabled dancers. In our work, we offer a range of different programs that are like a bit of a rolling process. And I'm more than happy to let you know about them another time, or by visiting some of our information. But we very much see ourselves as facilitators and advocates within that field of being a dance artist rather than teachers. So in 2019, our work really started to shift of thinking about how audiences received and experienced our work that we performed. So looking at how we could make our work relaxed, so people could enjoy and be themselves, and not have to fit into a box of what people expected you to have to be when watching a performance. And really, we always have involved disabled people in what we do, but more thinking about really consulting and co-creating and collaborating, and then being the testers throughout. So making sure that we are being accessible, and we are doing what we hope we're going to do. So both projects began with identifying the needs, the experiences our local disabled community faced on a daily basis, the barriers and challenges on a day-to-day basis, as well as when they're trying to access arts and culture. And we gained a new insight, as well as it reinformed the fact that the things that we already knew, that people still didn't feel welcome at events, their needs weren't being met, and lots of people avoided going to events, and that could be for lots of different reasons, the time of day, as well as not feeling unwelcome. So they had a real range of reasons why they didn't feel like they could go, and the reasons why they weren't enjoying it, completely disengaged with the arts. Some sound reasons, really, which we could all understand. And we started to work with new charities. So as a disability focused company, we worked with lots of people anyway, but what we wanted to do was try and reach those people that weren't engaging with us, or we weren't doing much with. And that was more people with visual impairment and who might be deaf, hard of hearing. So we really tried to focus those companies and charities that didn't access our work. And it was quite a very fruitful experience, and has actually changed and informed the way that we make work now. Excuse me. And we also in 2019 created the Frontline Arts Festival, which is the first disability arts festival that has happened. And we worked with over 50 disabled artists, showcasing the work over 5 weeks. It was, again, a great learning experience. It was just a brilliant thing to have in Stoke-on-Trent. And again, we learned a lot from how different people worked, different things that they asked for, their access requirements, plus how they work and what kind of things we need to do to meet their needs. We had commissions, performances, workshops. We had a Connects event with Unlimited. We had residencies, we had Meet the Artists and Q&A. So it's a really lovely mixed bag of different art forms, different types of disability. Some were disability arts, so had was about their disability, and others was just disabled people performing work. A range of settings, and also citywide. One of the feedback we had from our consultation that everything is quite city centre generic, so centric, sorry. So they don't get to see it in their hometown. Stoke-on-Trent's made up of 6 towns, so it's all how we all connect there. So I thought it'd be nice to show you a little film, because other people explaining things rather than me, and also just to see some visuals might be something that you would all like to see and be interested in. But just beforehand, just to be very clear that all of our venues were fully accessible. So we had easy read documents, clean signage, clear signage, BSL interpreters, captions, audio descriptions, voice to text, resting spaces, quiet spaces, bean bags in event spaces, including our auditoriums. We had sighted, that should say, guiding, so which we did with the guide dogs, and everything was relaxed. Our aim was basically to make sure that any needs would be met without them requesting. So there was always audio description, there's always BSL at every performance, even if somebody hadn't asked for it. And that was very, very welcomed by our community. So I shall show you the film now, which means I have to stop sharing. And I so miss seeing people when you're talking rather than just hearing. Right, that's the one. There you go.
Frontline Arts Festival is FRONTLINEdance's first attempt at running an arts festival, and it's Stoke-on-Trent's first time hosting a festival of this kind.
It's really good to see able-bodied people, yes, but then people that have visual and non-visual disabilities together.
We wanted the festival to represent all art forms, and we wanted to programme work created by or performed by disabled artists, simply because there isn't enough and more of that work needs to be programmed. We've opened up lots of opportunities from seeing the work to talk about it.
We need people with various disabilities, and it's about ensuring that they all get involved and have that recognition of our work, our profile.
Well, I think tonight it's incredible what them did tonight. I see loads of dancers like that, and it's a bit moving for me.
It's really important that people have the opportunity to come and enjoy an event as equally as anybody else. And that's why access was standard through all of our events and wasn't an add-on. And that included BSL interpretation, we had beanbags down for people who needed to rest. We gave the audience permission to get up and walk around if they needed to, so they didn't feel uncomfortable. We had audio description for people with visual impairment, and we also had easy read documents for people with learning disabilities.
I'd always watch performances, and they'd always be hearing people performing, and everybody would laugh, and I'd never know what they were laughing about. But then tonight, I feel like finally there are interpreters out there and you can understand what's happening on stage.
There is so much to learn and experience from being at this festival that it's a huge thing for Stoke-on-Trent.
It's a human right to have equal access to see work, so it should be the norm.
It was important for us that the festival programmed work by professional artists, but equally it had lots of opportunities for our community to join in, to see the work and take part, and in some cases perform alongside the professional artists too.
I'm the Snow Queen, baby! The main lady, the star of the show.
I think opening opportunities, opening the town up for people to see what's going on, and maybe it sows a seed in people so that they might go and see something else. It's been really productive and great for the area.
I think we are changing some attitudes and ideas around the city about the quality and international opportunity of disabled artists.
We don't value different bodies and different minds, and we need festivals like this to really elevate difference.
We see such a range of people and they're all making art equally as good as people that are able-bodied or don't have a disability.
I think it's really important to put out representation of disabled bodies and disabled identities, and art is an amazing way to do that. Art by disabled artists is the perfect way to do that.
Use this as a chance to inform yourself of wider artistic practices, because it's more than just what you watch on the telly.
I'd say that I always love seeing that because it was such a lovely, vibrant time. Yeah, I enjoyed doing that. So in terms of going back to my slide, sorry, let me just find where that is. It seems to have disappeared from my screen. Technical challenge, just a second. There we go. Can we see that? Yeah. Is everybody doing okay? With everybody being really silent, it's really hard to gauge or hear any reactions. But yeah. That experience, as well as doing See Me, really looked at how I make work and looked at our methodology, which was something that we're going to take forward all the time, which is very much about having our performances relaxed and thinking about the audiences a bit more than we did previously, and trying to really have quite an ambitious approach to think that how can we make our work accessible to everybody and enjoyable to everybody as part of the work, so without the add-ons, so not relying on audio description or people managing different things. So it started to become part of our creative process and sort of this stimulus to the way that we work, and it's sort of having a really positive effect in terms of people are finding it very accessible and enjoying it, and our balance is to try and make it so everybody can enjoy the work can speak for itself, and it's an important piece of work that we want to make and that we want to perform, as well as it being for everybody. So we're thinking of embedding these into our creative processes. So and again, like I mentioned, it's naturally creating a relaxed and often a more interactive performance experience, where I suppose the dancers and performers are seen as very real and very human, and that works for us as a contemporary dance company that perhaps doesn't work with characters so much, but it's sort of adding something quite fruitful to our relationship with our audiences as well. So we're constantly examining how people will receive that information. So what happened in a studio when we're making work, rather than thinking about it after it becomes part of the choreography, before it becomes part of the space that we use. And what we're doing is we're thinking of, okay, we are accepting the fact that people will be moving. They might be making some noises or sounds, which is all okay. And we want to make sure that they feel okay doing that. It might be a parent who's getting a bit stressed because their child isn't being quiet, and letting them know that's okay as part of our performance. Or it could be acknowledging somebody with a visual impairment is within our space. So we look at how we can work a little bit closer in terms of physically getting closer, so that person might be able to see a little bit more, and also wearing bright clothes, because again, that's something that makes it accessible. But I won't go on. I'm keeping on relaxed performances, Paul, so I'll stop there with that. Yeah, so it's we're engaging with the audience. It's quite spontaneous, but it's also very considered. So we're very much thinking of being interactive, but in a very sensitive way, because not everybody wants to interact with performance. That can be quite an uncomfortable thing for people. So again, that's what we're thinking in all of that. So that's just a bit of a summary with what I've just said, and the fact that what we are doing much more is trying to make our, I suppose in a way, before we made specific work for specific audiences, so a multi-sensory piece for people with severe learning disabilities, sensory impairments, and who've got profound multiple learning disabilities as well, whereas now what we want to do is try to create that in a different way, so it's not specific to an age group or specific to a type of disability, and we're having fun exploring how we can do that. And I suppose we're thinking about the emotional maturity of a piece as well, so thinking about how we can make something using all of the senses, which adds to the audience's experience in a very relaxed way, and not that they think it's a piece of work for a child or something like that. So that's what we're trying to work out. And we want to be flexible and allow the work to develop and grow in each of our spaces, so it can truly be a relaxed performance. So we're thinking about how and when we improvise and when we do certain things. And yeah. So one of the things that I mentioned to Paul that I'm going to just quickly mention today now is that we started to make work where the performers were doing the audio description. So they were describing what was physically happening when they were moving, but also their relationship with each other, why they were doing it, how it felt. So for somebody with a visual impairment could really grasp a little bit more than just the physicality or the general descriptions. And it is something we forgot to do, Paul. We forgot to describe ourselves at the start.
Lisa and I in the chat wrote to each other, we forgot to do that.
Yes, so perhaps we can do it after if we feel that's needed. But then what we found is those who who didn't enjoy contemporary dance, didn't like it so much, or felt like they really needed to understand it and they couldn't, found it, oh, actually, I'm really enjoying this. This is really good. It's telling me what I need to know. And they actually felt more of the performance because it felt more intimate, that they were part of the space and there was a dialogue going on that they were involved in. So it had a much deeper, they had a much deeper connection, and they said that added some richness to the work, which was really lovely for me to hear. And it's actually something that was quite unexpected. So we're putting all these things in place with, I suppose, disabled people in mind, but they can have a real profound and positive effect to everybody, because we're not all the same. We don't all have the same minds and we don't all have the same bodies. So I'm just checking time. Do I have, how much time do I have left, Paul? Okay,
you're absolutely fine. Carry on. Yeah.
Okay, so I might show this film at the end, just so you can see how, and I'll remind you why I'm showing it. It's just a little bit of an idea of this is when we started to do this. So it was just thinking about how our audience receives our work a little bit. But I think it's time to go to relaxed events a bit more. So why we're here, what everybody wants to think about. So relaxed events, as you can see from the photograph, this is one of our performances, and we had a place where people could lie down. Obviously, it's a non-conventional theatre setting. It's actually in a disused shop, and we've got bean bags. We had people to sit on chairs. They could stand, they could be on the floor, or they could be on bean bags, and they could lie down. So they basically chose where they wanted to be to feel relaxed while watching the performance. But it's not always about just feeling relaxed. It was because that meant they could manage their conditions. Okay, so what is a relaxed event? So to me, a relaxed event is an inclusive event that is being considerate, sensitive, and mindful of the range of needs and challenges that many people face. And this could mean that at a relaxed event, the lights are left on slightly or in full to avoid the darkness, and that no strobe lighting is used, and that's because they can be major triggers for a large amount of our community. That the music is quieter than you would perhaps normally expect in a theatre or at a different event. So really thinking about not playing really loud music. It can be physically painful and uncomfortable for many people. That there's no sudden noises or sound effects that are used, so getting rid of that reaction of jumping and being surprised. That attendees are not expected to sit still or quiet for the duration, and there's an open attitude to this. So everybody who attends the event knows that these things are going to happen. So audiences can feel comfortable that people aren't going to complain, which they do, or tut or shush people, that can and does still happen in many traditional settings. The ability to move to a different seat, along with freely leaving and entering the event. At least one quiet or additional room is available to them, which has multi benefits and uses. So if somebody's overwhelmed and needs time to quieten down or to regulate, there's that there, but it does have lots of multi benefits and uses. And we found that during FAF, parents who needed to breastfeed or express milk actually found them really useful places as well. Presenters and performers introduce themselves in a relaxed and informative manner before the performance starts or the event starts. And if playing characters, then it's stipulated to help the attendees understand that they're not portraying something that is real, it's a made up thing. So they aren't playing themselves, or they aren't particularly the play is a made up play, it's not real life, unless it is, and then that's obviously something that you would explain. So it removes that barrier of you and them, and it answers some questions that they might have, and also helps people who think very literally about things. That bean bags are provided as an alternative to chairs, and that's within the auditorium spaces, and or where your event's taken place. I know this isn't just about performances, and that greater interaction with presenters, performers and attendees happen throughout the event. Okay, so that's sort of an overview of what a relaxed event is. So who may benefit from relaxed events? So many health conditions can mean sitting upright and still in the same position for a period of time is exhausting, it's painful, it's uncomfortable, and can cause a condition to flare up. So individuals can feel tense and worried and anxious even at the thought of it, which flares up all of their conditions, thinking, oh, I've got to keep still and I can't move for the duration. And obviously we've got to now consider long COVID. It's something that's going to have an impact on more people having exactly those needs, being in pain, being exhausted, not being able to sit and hold their body up for a long period of time. The learning disabled community is perhaps is a community that people think of immediately when they think of relaxed performances. So thinking about a neurodivergent, autistic people, sensory communication disorders, which is probably the most popular community that it's sold to. But parents and children and first-time theatre goers can really benefit from relaxed events. They don't have to feel that their child needs to behave and be quiet. Obviously, those with dementia would benefit greatly from events being more relaxed. It's basically letting people be. And people who struggle to stay focused and have short attention spans and invisible disabilities, mental health conditions. So that's a summary. It's not an exhausted list of people, but hopefully just to give you a range of ideas of why you're making your events relaxed. There is a real need, a real great need. And some of them have come from my own personal experience. And so I spent a very painful and enjoyable time watching a performance in a disused factory, not knowing that the length of work, so how long I needed to tolerate it for, it was bitterly cold, which increased the pain, and not seeing an exit for me to escape quietly to without, you know, either going through the performers or rummaging around the audience members. Really sort of with the battle of me wanting to watch the performance. I really wanted to watch it and I didn't want to miss out, and all that sort of really increased the discomfort, which took actually weeks to better itself. So a chair being offered for me to sit down would have helped, being told how I could quietly escape, and advertising to everybody that this is okay to move, and would have basically avoided all of that discomfort, and I wouldn't have been in agony for 2 weeks at least afterwards. And another one was related to my son, who has learning disabilities. So we went to an event and the music was really loud. It was really, really loud. I couldn't understand why it was so loud, because it didn't need it. The organizer was aware of how it affected my son and still did nothing about it. So continued for the rest of the performances to play that long. What he did, this was what he had, I had no option to do. I couldn't stop him, and he had to run to escape it. He threw himself on the floor, he hit his head, he screamed, he cried, and it took him more than a day for him to recover. So it was totally unexpected for me, because I wouldn't have put him in that environment in the first place if I knew that was going to be, because it was in a shopping centre. So it was in the middle of the shopping centre on a Saturday. So I assume the organisers had some awareness and consideration for those who might be shopping, who might find loud music intolerable and painful anyway. You know, I think living in 2021, I don't know how anybody or any organisers could avoid that. Avoid knowing how music can affect, or the loudness of music could affect people. So we had to leave. I'd actually traveled 2.5 hours to the festival and stayed overnight. So I was very deflated, very upset and angry, and it took us a couple of days to get over it. My son at least a day in a sleeping over, because all of that really exhausted him. So an audience experience who came to FAF, she mentioned that she said, I don't come to watch shows and theatres as I find it too painful to sit. However, I know of inclusive frontline dances and the aim of the festival, so I thought I'd come and give it a try. So being told at the start that I could move if needed made it instantly feel relaxed. And as a result, she wasn't tensed or stressed or worried. And that should say, in fact, instead of intact, she actually sat for the whole duration of the performance without having any pain and without having to move. And so just something as simple as giving someone permission can automatically, just having that feeling of being welcomed and being accepted and having the freedom to do what you know you need to move, can really not be underestimated, because it's not a nice thing to experience, and lots of people experience this discrimination on a daily basis. So I wanted to signpost you all to Tourette's Hero if you've not come across her. And I read a blog about her a while ago, and thought, oh, I'd actually have a look, because it was very much had a real reason for me to share this today, with it being about relaxed performances. And there's some signposting here for her webpage, some FAQs on relaxed performances from her point of view and what they do, and also the blog, which is I'm Never Coming to a Theatre Again. So this is in 2014, so 16, sorry. She said just under 3 years ago that she had an experience at a theatre that left me sobbing in a sound booth. I didn't need to read the whole of the post to remember how intensely sad and humiliated I felt when, despite loads of planning and forethought, I'd been asked to move to the booth at the side of the stage because people were complaining about my tics. I sat in that box with my friend who'd been moved too, fighting to contain my tears and hide how hurt I really was. I wanted to leave the theatre then and there and never set foot in one again. Things feel so much better now. I'm more confident in articulating my needs and asserting my rights. And as a wheelchair user, I'm generally treated with much more understanding than when I could walk. But the intensity of these moments is permanently etched into our memory. So I think it's something that we can all learn from. And, you know, I am hearing stories now of people that of theatres that move the complainers rather than moving the people that they're complaining about. So what can you do? So we've obviously come back to that slide of what is a relaxed event. So having a real look at that if you need to, or the list of what's expected at a relaxed event, and request that your event or performance is relaxed with the venue that you're using. So as artists and organisations, having it within your tour bag that you would like to offer relaxed performances, and this is what needs to happen. If a venue's never come across it before, then help them, work with them to get it right, and help them to implement what was on that list, which I think is quite easy things to do. And they're not things which add an extra cost either, which is also sometimes a helpful thing if you've already fundraised in advance before thinking of these things. It's really important for you to ensure that when you're visiting a venue that all staff have received disability awareness training, and know exactly what is happening, what is available to the audiences and attendees, and how to ensure everybody feels welcomes and that their needs are met. I think it's a real good practice for us as artists and organisations to ask this of people, not to just assume or go, oh, you know, it's not our responsibility. I think we all need to take responsibility for making sure that everybody's thinking about access as a whole. And I would always say, to make it even more accessible and more relaxed and friendly, is to learn Makaton, provide easy read documents and programs, and make sure that there's clear signage. So when planning with performers, so if you're a performer yourself, an artist or a speaker, or if you're asking that of your company members, work out how they're going to greet and introduce themselves at the event. A good visual description as well is always handy at the start, just to make sure that happens. And again, you can increase your access by using Makaton as you're doing your explanations and introductions. You might have some visuals, or you might have some symbols. So basically the audience knows what to expect during the performance, but they also know a little bit about you and a little bit about what they're going to experience. And also, what is really important, a reminder that it is a relaxed performance, and making noises and movements is something that everybody accepts. Creating social stories about your work in general is a really helpful thing to do if you're expecting an audience to come. So it's a little bit of a social story is an information about the event, what to expect. So it's about preparing those who struggle with unfamiliarity. So might not even enter the event or enter the space that you have, just because it's far too uncomfortable and physically impossible and physically painful to do these things. So having something on your website or you advertise in advance where somebody can click on, where it's easy read, it's social stories which are very much photographs, so introducing you to the cats, perhaps the order of things. And what we have started to do with our participants, because we haven't made work at the moment with it being locked down, is that if we've moved into a new venue, we've prepared our participants by videoing, so they know what to accept. So this is the venue, this is what it looks like. As you enter the door, it was a lot to do around COVID as well, so you'll wash your hands, you know, you'll put your mask on and all those kind of things, just so people can physically see. So we're thinking about language is a real barrier for lots of people, the comprehension of language, the understanding. So we're trying to think about as many creative ways that we can explore and how we communicate with people. And that's just some of the ways that you can. And also, I think it's very much up to the artist and performances, but I think if you can start to think about how you can be a bit more interactive in your performances and events, naturally people feel more relaxed and like they can be themselves, like they don't have to sit down. And you see that more from multi-sensory work or interactive children's work, but let's think about how that can be done within for adults too. Thinking about all the senses that we want to engage, and not just the dominant ones that we expect everybody to have from the outset, rather than add-ons, because it just makes it more enjoyable and more added. And it's not then about translating, it's about it being part of what you do. And communicate and talk to your audiences. I think that's what you can do. You can find out, was that a relaxed performance for you? You know, what can we do better? What are you finding challenging? What do you find really works? And share those experiences with your peers as well. So we're always informing each other. We're always sharing new experiences, and we're problem solving challenges together as well. So I think that's an important thing. And one of the things from my point of view of what I know I need to do is definitely prepare our performers in advance, because you know, lots of people who are trained quite traditionally, but also just more or less very used to not being interrupted when they do a performance. You know, it can really sort of shock you and change your focus, and it can throw people, and people feel less confident, and so work out some of those challenges they might face. And that's very much a personality thing as well as technique. So performers need to be comfortable, they need to be confident, they have the ability to improvise, have the skills to engage with the audiences, able to switch in the space physically maybe, and have great awareness, being intuitive and personable. So I do think we are asking more of our performers than if they were on a closed stage in a darkened theatre where they were left to just perform and without no interruptions, unless they were used to heckling and it was part of, you know, what you do. And again, most people are now a lot more experienced with outdoor performances where they are naturally very relaxed passers-by. Not everybody will sit and watch the whole of the performances, so I think it's naturally happening in our platforms as we grow and develop. And also communicate what's on offer. There needs to be a real culture change and shift, and disabled people aren't knowing that all of this is available to them. They're very, very shocked, and not everybody understands and knows. And there's always new people who have just recently become disabled, or new people giving birth to disabled children. So there's always the need to shout about it, to let people know what you're doing. And that can be done through icons on your programs. It could be physically contacting people, having a conversation with people. Like, reaching audiences is a hard thing to do, and disabled communities in particular are used to being excluded, so there's a part of them that they don't come or want to watch. Not talking about everybody, but there's a high percentage of those who are not involved in culture and arts that perhaps don't go because they don't think that their needs will be met and they're going to enjoy it or understand it because of the communication. So lastly,
so Rachel, sorry to just interrupt. Could you just go back and to the previous slide? And I'm aware of them, such as BSL and stuff, but it'd be good to know what those symbols relate to, if possible.
We did have a massive challenge finding the right icons. And even when we approached people like Unlimited, they didn't have all the icons either. And our program also was ran for people with learning disabilities, so it had times and symbols very differently to what you would normally expect. So some of these have been updated since 2009 as well. So we've got the BSL, and can you see my pointer, or am I doing this just for me? You can. Obviously that's wheelchair access. This is a changing place, so a changing space where somebody could change themselves if they need to. I can't see anybody nodding or anything, so if any of these, just make a note. Large print. Thanks. Yeah, or unmute yourself and go that might be good. Audio description, a relaxed performance, a resting space. So our artist who was doing our installation made this because there wasn't anything for it. This is a welcoming sign that we can help and we'll listen. We have hearing loops, and we have easy read, and so easy read and social stories, and Makaton signage. There's the voice to text, and I've forgotten what the TT stands for. So I might have to find that out and let you know.
That was intriguing me, so it'd be good to know.
Text.
We can maybe in the break.
Yes,
we'll have a little,
yes, yes. Thank you.
Very good to know.
Yeah. Yeah. We basically got a lot of them by Googling and asking for the icons and seeing which ones we were able to use. This is the Makaton charity wouldn't allow you to use their icon unless you've had specific Makaton training with them. So we just literally thought we're just going to have to put the word in a circle just so people know. And there's a little bit of the friendly hand as well, which is trying to say to somebody that you're welcome. Yeah, sorry about that. I shall go. So resources. So there are lots of different things out there, but not to bombard you with having to do lots of research after today in time. I'm just signposting you to Demystifying Access from Unlimited. I don't know if any of you have read that or it's part of what you use all the time. And also the official londontheatre.com actually had quite a nice summary of a relaxed performance. So it's very much geared to more towards autism, neurodivergent, sensory and learning disability. But it gives you some experience of what theatre goers get from it. So I thought it was quite a nice thing as a bit of like, you know, why do I need to do this and what benefits does it have? Yeah, this is just more about where you can find some information about us. And we've got some evaluations on FAF and also on Seeing Me, which does help a little bit with access if it's something that you wanted to look at. And again, if you wanted to contact me to find anything out or have a conversation or just to keep in touch, that would be a nice thing to do. So film to finish with, or are we done? Film?
Let's film. And whilst you're doing that, Alex has said teletype ? Is that the TT?
I have never heard of that, to be honest. So it wouldn't. I'm just trying to think. It was.
I've got text telephone that I'd seen online as well. Was it? No.
No. I shall do my best to try and remember and find out. I'll look a little bit back because I think on our icons in our folders it says which is which. It's just if I can find them quickly with everything else. Can you see the film? Or have I not stopped sharing the?
Yeah, you can see that.
Okay, so this is a film of Seeing Me, which is, we made performances for all the 6 towns and we performed different pieces in the 6th town, all in one day. And we used buses to get in between each one. The dancers worked really, really hard for me that day. So lots of credits to them because it was the hottest day of the year. They had lots of things to negotiate and think about. I think you can just see how relaxed it can be. Hear it okay?
Seeing Me was a project that for the first time we wanted to look at disability issues and themes rather than just being a company that have disabled partners. So we wanted to work with our local community, people that we've never connected with before, and provide an opportunity for some emerging disabled dancers, people with more invisible disabilities and more hidden disabilities, people with visual impairment and who are deaf as well.
Getting to work with people from different backgrounds, it's quite special in the sense that you learn so much from other people.
There should be no barriers, whether it's a physical or learning disability. Like myself, I've got Asperger's and moderate learning difficulty. You can't just label someone and say, oh no, you can't do this, because that's not true.
All of the solos came from observational work that I did with people who've just had a stroke, so they're in rehabilitation in Haywood Hospital, and we were looking at limbs not working for us anymore and them being out of control. Also thinking and talking about people who are in pain with arthritis and how that feels like. The whole point of Seeing Me was to make it accessible for everybody, and talking to the visually impaired group, we wanted to know about audio description and how they find that. Is it something they like? Is it something that works for them? They said what they find most tricky is trying to listen to the voice, trying to experience what's going on, to sense what's going on, and if there is any actors with a voice, trying to hear them as well.
We tried making louder movement with our bodies and using our breath more so they could hear what we were doing. They knew where we were on space, but they had no idea what exactly we were doing. Now we do the same piece, but we speak throughout it, saying what we're doing and why we're doing that, and we really talk about why I'm lifting her and why she's leaning on me and how that makes us feel.
I use my finger to push my forehead back to lie on Jordan's back with my feet off the floor. I feel like I'm flying. Let's pick up the pace.
I'm going to push your hip away.
I'll lift your leg up, place it back down.
I'm going to spin you around.
I'll lunge to the side, we touch hands.
My fingers are tight. I try really hard to open my fingers, which I find difficult because they're really stiff and tense.
I think talking it through with the clothing, the combination was really good. It made it easier for me to follow. It's nice that it's inclusive. I don't feel as though, because I'm visually impaired and physically impaired, it's nice to think, oh, somebody's thought about that. It makes you feel included.
We've just done lots of different dancing using our arms with little balls and little ribbons and stuff like that. You had lots of fun, didn't you? Hey? Yeah! It was very inclusive for the children, so they could like join in and they could get involved.
It's impossible with Con to keep him still. He makes Connor happy when he's running around and doing new things and meeting new people and interacting with other children who have Down syndrome.
We all joined in and I thought it was dead good.
I wanted this piece to be for passers-by, so people who would not expect to see it. The local community mentioned that everything happens in the city centre and they'd love to see this kind of work where they live. So I thought, why don't we do everything in the 6 towns? It was really nice to be able to do something which people thought, oh, what's this about? But then at the end of it, go, wow.
We enjoyed it. It was an absolutely incredible experience.
I think any form of performance is important to bring out to the community. And that is important for people to be able to have a different form of expression.
The people who've organised that actually need a gold medal.
Seeing Me made me work with groups I'd never worked with before, who I really enjoyed working with. And I think it's given us a real new direction to be able to contact these groups, to partner up with them and work more closely with them.
Good girl.
Okay, so hopefully that sort of sums up a little bit about what I was talking about. It's quite bittersweet because I was quite poorly when I was doing that interview. I just had an operation, so I sort of think, oh God, I was feeling terrible then, and I looked terrible, but hey ho. Yeah, I think it's just a real thing that I really hope that everybody starts to think about, every artist and organisations when they're making work, that there is, a big community out there that we need to be thinking about. So I think I've finished for now, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm sure people will have lots of questions to throw your way ever so shortly. Thank you so much for that, Rachel. That was great, and I really want to come to the next Frontline and experience that. I'd love to. I'm just very quickly gonna, just before the break, introduce the idea of sensory bags. I will say I am absolutely no expert in this thing, so Rachel, please do chip in if you because you said you were using it too. So, but I came across it when Kerry Choutov, who works for Culture Coventry, Herbert Art Gallery, introduced it at a previous session, and unfortunately she is off on she has the audacity to go on holiday when I need her. So she's not able to make it today, but I thought it was still a really useful thing to try and open up thoughts about, because actually it, as Rachel was saying, it's a lot of these things are very affordable, if not free, and are things that just make experiences around museums, and I think we can do it with theatre as well, a lot more accessible and meaningful. So I'm just going to share my screen. So sensory bag. I've put this little sort of definition, a bag to relax, stimulate, engage and enhance the experience for neurodiverse attendees. My understanding of it is that it was very much thought up around the sort of autistic experience, and it particularly works in museums, and it's a bag of a series of items. So the Herbert Art Gallery are putting this in place and bringing it into their museums in the next, I think, few weeks. And it's essentially a bag which you can get for free from the front desk of any of the Culture Coventry sites that have a loads of objects, which I'll go on. Oh, sorry, I just clicked off. Can you still see that? You can't see it. I've unshared it. Oh no.
It's disappeared from that. Right, it's back
There we
now.
go.
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry. There we go. So some of the items, these were sort of 5 headings that sort of sum up what might go into a bag. Is it practical? Does it engage the senses? Is it fun? Is it informative? Is it calming? On is it practical? It might be things such as ear defenders. I know, Rachel, you were saying you had a horrible experience where music was too loud or overstimulating, so that ear defenders help diminish that. Does it engage the senses? As it sort of says on the tin, a sensory bag should be filled with sensory objects. So in museums, musical rain sticks, kaleidoscope goggles are things that just help with individuals who really, whose mind really requires overstimulation, and the ear defenders and things like that are to diminish stimulation for other requirements. Is it fun? Objects should add to the visitor experience. They should be fun as well as practical. Is it informative? So in galleries, it's maps of spaces. It might be maps of where the relaxed spaces are or the quiet spaces are. It may be visual stories. As I said, information about quiet spaces. And is it calming? So things like fidget spinners, squash balls and soft toys within a bag, again, are just really useful for certain neurodiverse requirements. And I think, and what I sort of, going back to this slide, an anticipated cost of the items here is £50, and you could easily, I think, as artists, put that into an Arts Council bid or a funding application, and really it doesn't affect the project negatively in any way. That's a very simple bag, and as I was listening to Rachel, I was thinking a lot about how actually that can be crafted around your show or your gallery experience. So particularly with smells, if there's a particular scent that correlates with your story that you are telling, then that is not just a really nice thing for the neurodiverse, but it enriches the performance in some way. I've been thinking a lot of my solo shows play on self-indulgence quite a lot, so I'd have a Paul's head squash like stress ball that was made to look like me. So £50 is a very inexpensive one, but you can be really creative with that, I think. And I guess that's a provocation I've got out of what you were talking about, Rachel, is actually this is a standard bag and that's hugely useful to people, but how do we make that more creative and more part of the experience and part of the world of the performance or the world of the the gallery exhibition that you're creating. I don't know if you have anything to add on sensory bags, Rachel. I'm sure you have a lot more wisdom than I to talk about them.
And I think it's just more from what you said, let it be relevant to you and your work that you do. So it has a real purpose. It has a real sort of, it gives the audience the opportunity to engage further in your work and what they're experiencing, really. You know, lots of people who do struggle would naturally have their own ear defenders, and they would have naturally things like that. But what you're saying is basically you're welcome here, and we want to engage with you, which is I cannot tell you that speech like that it speaks volumes knowing that you're welcome somewhere, because you very often don't feel very welcome. So a sensory bag would definitely make somebody feel relaxed, I think.
And I don't know, from your experience, it sounds like your festival and your work is particularly good at that. I've seen a lot of museums talking about it, but I haven't really seen any theatres or performance venues talking about it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I've not come across it. It's more to do with, I think, if a company is providing it rather than the venue itself. And I suppose to thinking about what the purpose is, because if it is for a child or an adult, majority of the time, the standard toys are something that they would have anyway. So they'd have their favorite ones, and they would not dare leave the house without it in some instances. But it's just those extra little bits of information as well, which makes it really helpful, like where the quiet space is, you know, all the documentation and the easy read thing. And if you were to put that together in terms of your company and venue, to having those why it relates as well, and an easy read document to different parts of your performance or your event. Like even what we did in hospitals, it was more or less you get we did that, and everybody had to have their own bag because of infection control. And all things like that you need to consider when you're in hospital. But then there'll be a point where they get something out and then they would put it back in again. So yeah, it's my experiences with working in those settings are sort of coming more to the mainstream now. I'm perhaps thinking a bit more adult and non-disability as well when I'm thinking about what I'm providing or what I'm asking from the audience. Tangent, that was about venues. You didn't ask about that, sorry.
I know. Well, I got onto venues as well. So, but I just think generally it's not something I'd come across until hearing this. Like it's not. I don't have lived experience of autism, or I don't have any close family relatives that are autistic. So I didn't know about this as a thing that is useful.
I think it's great.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely something on future tours and stuff that you can create. I'm already thinking of stuff for my shows of what I can create that enhance the experience.
And what you're doing, if you're taking that to a venue that's never had that before, then you're sowing the seed for them to think about it. And even offering that question to them, saying, oh, do you not do this normally? Perhaps it's something that you should start thinking about, you know, and that's how things grow.
Yeah, little independent Paul O'Donnell's doing it, so why are you not doing it?
Well, that was my whole argument of the Frontline Arts Festival, because we were doing so much more than bigger organisations do, and we're a tiny small company. And there was one main reason why it was successful, is because we wanted to make it happen, and it was very genuine, and so we just did it. It was parts of it was very hard work because things aren't in existence, but a lot more is now. So yeah.
Great. I'm just gonna stop sharing. I think if we have a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and go into the Q&A. I've seen a couple of questions popping up in the chat. So if we come back in 5 minutes, so Rachael has uncovered in the break that TT meant touch tour. Of course it did.
Sorry about that. Like, yeah.
Great. There's some questions in the chat already. Alex, do you want to start by asking about the sensory bags?
Yeah, I think they're a brilliant idea. I've got two questions. Well, one question and one comment. First of all, how do you get things back from people? Because both my nephews are quite autistic, and if they were given something out of a bag, getting it back off them might be quite difficult.
I did think the same thing. I thought that, well, mainly because of COVID as well. So if you were giving something, to ask for it back might be a tricky thing. And how do you make sure they're cleaned and no viruses and infections are spread between the two? Because comprehension is often an issue and a problem, but not always. So that would be perhaps something to ask when can't recall a name. Who was it who set them up at the museum?
Kerry.
Kerry, yeah, maybe ask Kerry what her intentions are with that. Like I say, it might be for those who had not brought anything with them anyway. But in terms of changing places, the reasons for them is because of being quite inhumane and changing people on the floor, on a dirty floor where lots of people don't even put their bags down on the floor.
Yeah, especially disabled accessible toilets can be quite disgusting.
Yeah.
Things. So the idea of changing an adult in that space where they have to sit somewhere,
or mainly like lie down. But I think it's one of the main things is having a hoist in that space as well. So because physically when a person gets to a certain size and age, then you can't physically move, they would need a hoist to come out. So those changing places are brilliant because that's what they offer.
Yeah, I wouldn't have got a hoist. I couldn't get a baby changing table. It was deemed unnecessary. But anyway, okay, thank you. Yes, because I'm working with a project about dementia for next year, and I think the bags would be a really good idea. I hadn't thought of them, so yeah,
it would be.
Fiddle muffs and things.
I wonder as well if there's like, again, depending on which sort of neurodiverse requirements you're responding to with the bags in particular, like there must be like a really inexpensive party bag that they sort of keep. Like I'm thinking glow sticks and something like that are things that you would have in like pantomimes and stuff anyway, and it's like part of that experience.
And I think if you lost the bits, you lose them. That's sort of, they've taken it away and they'll use it next time and they'll go to the theatre because they've got that with them perhaps. So I don't think it's a major problem. I just wondered if you had an experience of like prizing things back and not looking like a cow.
It's a very, very full bag what they do there, isn't there? There's lots of things in there. So I suppose one of the options would be just to offer one, but to give it away. So if there is that need for they're obviously the information booklets look like they're all laminated, so they could be wiped and come back. So is the e-reader.
I should say that one, the picture wasn't Herbert's.
Okay.
When they've got their own bags, but so yeah, not that was just an example of a sensory bag that I found on Google.
But saying that, we've always used sensory props in all of our workshops, and we've always had them back. We've not given them at the end of it. So it's very much, I suppose, there is a way of saying, okay, you have this, and then you're going to give it back at the end. It goes into a bag, and being very, very clear. Because I'm thinking that's what we do in all of our workshops with.
And also it's maybe just being aware of that as well in a bit, that there is that potential. So
that you might lose a few.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in my very first touring show, I performed as a cowboy in bars, and part of the performance is every audience member had a cowboy hat that they would wear. And of course, at the end of the night, people want to keep that cowboy hat, and I try as best as I can, and I think the final line of the show is, I'm a cowboy, not a millionaire, so please give my hats back. So I make something of it, but I know that I'm going to lose some hats because people I have had a drink and enjoy the hats. So I think it's maybe also having contingencies for that, of if we lose something, we have to replace it, and we've got some contingency money for that, potentially.
Yeah.
Collier wrote something, for the sake of conversation and with the intention to push it further, what if taken this concept to new levels with restorative performances where one can find the comfort to overcome past negative experiences and enjoy a full cultural life? So I think that was responding to, as you were speaking, Collier was talking about how, and I found it really interesting what she was writing, the burden of accumulated prior negative experiences, and how the window of tolerance can grow or reduce and prevent people from trying again. And I think you'd agree with that, with the two examples you gave in your presentation, Rachel, of really negative experiences where you wouldn't go back to that festival again because it was such a damaging moment, for your relationship with that festival as much as for you individually. And so I think, Collier, do you have an idea of what a restorative performance might include or be? I know you might need a couple of minutes to write that into the chat, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that in particular, Rachel, about...
To be fair, with the work we were doing in Seeing Me was doing a little bit of that, because we were working with and co-creating our work with people and telling their stories, and they were about how they'd experienced those negative things in everyday life, not necessarily just at the theatre, from friends stopping talking to them when they were lost their sight, for example, and feeling very, very scared and vulnerable meeting new people. So going to a theatre is a really big deal to a person that can't see, because they got a lot of trust. You know, they might have had things stolen from them, like people putting things through at the shopping desk, you know, like putting in like perfume, all of a sudden something coming up as £20 and stuff. So I suppose we were starting that in terms of from a participatory level, I think, by just naturally having those discussions, consulting, and then getting them to be the ones that were saying, this is working or this isn't working, this would make me come, this still wouldn't make me come. You know, having those honest relationships have been the start of that feeling.
And I wanted to ask the question in a slightly different way. Reflecting on those two examples that you gave in the presentation, like what would they need to do, or what should they do that would encourage you to return to them? Or or was the experience so damaging that you don't think they could sort of make it up to you?
The first experience was quite a while ago, and I spoke to the company about it, and it's something that's embedded in their head as a result of me saying, you know, I'm in a lot of pain and this is all that you needed to have done. And so that helped and reassured me, and things grew in terms of access as a result in different areas. To be fair, the person at a festival very, very recently knows me quite well as well. So it was even it was very hurtful to experience, because of knowing me and my son anyway. And not apologizing for it or saying, oh no, what can I do? There was none of that. So quite new. I feel quite sensitive about it at the moment still, because it's really hard to have that conversation, because there's
Collier,
I think that helped.
Collier's just written, and I think it does make sense to us. We're just trying to sort of understand the how of how to do that. But she's written, inspired by the concept of relaxed performances, I left a reflection how to take it to new levels to create a restorative ambience, to see all these negative memories go away and put faith back in arts and culture. This as an iterative process at a human level. Yeah, I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done to respond to those negative memories, and the negative experience in spaces has a very lingering effect on a lot of people. So I think it is important to work out what a restorative event might be. And I think, as Rachel, you were saying, it's what you were doing was that consultation with the people that were affected by those negative experiences to try and work out the resolution. And I think between the two examples you've given, you raised the concern with the factory one, and they responded to that with, okay, we're sorry, this is what we need to do to put it in place, and it's embedded in their mind. Whereas the more recent experience have responded with, well, we're not going to do anything about that. And that's where the real damage, it feels like, happens, is when you're not prepared to meet that requirement or make that change.
Yeah, and I think there's also this overarching thing that it is discrimination. You know, there's a law, you know, there is a law that everybody should be abiding to as well. So it's not just about being, you know, and it's there for a reason. Lots of people don't implement it. It's like, this was in 2010 and still lots of things haven't been done. But yeah, I think it's just whenever you put anything on, be conscious of all those things on the list, the lights and the sound and things like that. So, for example, one of the reasons that I didn't sort of go into theatre performance or go for those companies is that I suffer from hemiplegic migraines where lights are a trigger. So if I go to watch a performance and they start to strobe, I immediately have to close my eyes. Otherwise, I'm going to be temporarily paralyzed. I won't be able to see. I'll be in a lot of head pain. And that's what happens to me. And I suppose you wouldn't, if you didn't know that, wouldn't even think that was a need for me to have. So literally, you know, I close my eyes sometimes watching performances because the lights start to trigger a very unpleasant experience. So, yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions? I have about 5,000, but I just want to open it up to see if anybody else has questions. Lisa has written, feels like perhaps there is also lots of space for work to be made about this as a concept with restorative practice at its core. Do you want to explain that at all, Lisa?
I found myself feeling really inspired by Colia's question, and it made me think that this idea, it feels kind of profound, doesn't it? And it shouldn't, but to put that restorative practice into work, but also making work about that as a concept. So actually exploring that idea of people having these experiences that aren't positive while in performance or while in venues, while in spaces, and actually examining that as work and making that work restorative also could be something that would be very interesting to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. There's your mission, Lisa. Get cracking. Good luck. Does anybody else have any questions they want to throw towards Rachel? Otherwise, I shall continue with mine. Oh, in collaboration with Colia, of course. There we go. New collaboration formed. I guess then, going on to my questions, and please do. Lisa, is that your hand? Okay, you go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just giving space in case anyone else had a question first. But I keep coming back to this each week. But Rachel, I just wondered, in terms of relaxed performances, with so much of work being online at the moment, whether there were things specifically to performance or conversation on Zoom or other online places that people can do to make those spaces more relaxed. It's been lovely seeing you naturally do that this morning, through right at the start saying this is a relaxed space, so please do get up, and I've noticed a few things throughout that you've done. But I just, yeah, do you have advice for people making online work specifically?
I think there's still lots of the same triggers. So if you're watching a performance, then you do have more control at home in terms of what volume. For example, you can watch things and experiencing work. There's also, but I think exactly some of the same principles. So if things are going to be sudden and they're going to still be like shock you, those kind of things, there's a really simple thing. What you can do is you can put trigger warnings. So you can have a little think about what things might be. It might be if you're thinking about what the work is about thematically, so trigger warnings have often come from a mental health perspective of thinking of what is being discussed might trigger something. But you could also have and strobe lighting is normally advertised in events, or flashing lights from photography. So having those warnings beforehand, so during this performance, but being very, very specific. It might be at certain times, or there's an actual element within the performance that something happens that indicates it's going to happen now. I suppose that could be done. I've not really had loads of experience of sharing professional work on Zoom, so I've not investigated that so much. But what we're trying to do as a company is to create some film that has, basically I'll be working with a dancer who is deaf, who is BSL signs BSL, somebody, and then the dancers will be doing audio description. So actually throughout the film, it'll all be quite accessible, and the same as what we would do live, we would do by a film as well. And also we're thinking about how people can view our dance afterwards. So there's an option left for them. So you could actually do optional performances, so things with or without, and audio description, just the sound, so people experience the performance without the visuals, just the sound, as well as easy reads to explain some of the things. So documentation. So we're trying to look at everything of how people receive it and how we can always give that. That makes sense?
Cody has written, Ari, trigger warnings. Every time I see one, I am, quote, triggered in advance without being able to make a judgment myself if what comes next may be triggering or not.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, a complexity of trigger warnings, is that sometimes they're pre-triggering.
Yeah. I think it's I think the need to warn people of certain things is needed, so then they can decide if it's something that they can deal with that day or with that time. And it might be like, actually I can't do that quite now, so I don't think I can watch it. But it to be like quite descriptive in a way of saying this is about what it is, rather than perhaps an overall quite wide thing, which could mean lots of different things. It's specifically about this would be the most helpful thing for people, I personally think.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question about the communication you have with audiences in advance of the events. I think Frontline is potentially quite an, I don't want to say an easy one to understand, but the whole nature of the festival is that everything is as widely accessible as it possibly can.
Yeah.
For a touring artist or an independent festival that doesn't necessarily have access as its core drive, as you really do, do you have examples of like what marketing materials or assets you create in advance to tell trigger warnings, or to create that experience, an idea of that experience? We spoke a little bit about the logos, which look like they're hugely useful to give you that snapshot. Oh, okay, they're doing this thing, but it'd be great to just hear about some of the other ways in which you communicate with audiences about what to expect of the event and what is met, I guess.
Yeah, so one of the things you can use is a social story, like I mentioned. So it's like all broken down a little bit, so they know what to expect from the venue, the practicalities, but also then a little bit of information about you and the work. So it's more familiar. They can see people beforehand. They've seen your face, and they know it's you, and they know that you're going to be acting, or they know that you're going to be real, talking about your experiences, whatever that might be. So a good thing, which is used a lot anyway, is little films, little videos, little video chats. And again, something that we didn't do is I didn't give an audio description of the films beforehand as well, so apologies for that, but just sort of that overview of even maybe doing that right at the start. So if you are I think we all need to really naturally start to do that on video as well. So, you know, I'm Paul, I'm a male. Describe how you would visually describe yourself. I'm not that, but I'm obviously doing it for you.
Incredibly handsome, young.
Yeah, so to have that thing, and then just have a bit of context about what can be seen. So even though the purpose might be for somebody, perhaps a learning disabled person, or somebody who needs that social story, you are also thinking about other people as well, or need that video in advance. And I suppose it's how we communicate and what things we use that naturally shows that we're welcome. So let me just very quickly, our festival program is obviously, our festival is very different to what we do when we independently tour and go with work, because we haven't got this sort of, I can't see it on here. I don't know why not. I'll try and have a look how I can do this in a minute, but basically why is that?
Or if not, if you send it to me after,
I can do that. I might be able to put it in the attachments in a minute while you're talking. Somebody
just to chip in to say, for those listening in, like, Lisa's been collecting the links from your presentation that the Tourette's Hero links and things like that, and we'll put that in the YouTube, the box below the YouTube video when we put the video online.
Yeah, brilliant.
So we can also put that leaflet in if there's a link to it or something.
Right, okay, brilliant.
For an example.
Yeah. So yeah, communicating that, the main thing is visuals, I think, always work in terms of printed language, but then within that, using icons and symbols rather than lots of words, like you mentioned, and keeping it quite simple. And being really, really clear, like if it is a relaxed performance, this is a relaxed performance, and this is what you can experience. And you do that through all your general marketing, where you're exactly the same time as you're marketing your show anyway. And part of your audience development plan should always include diversity. So where you're sending this information to. So, you know, if you want to engage more people with disabilities, then you need to be sending all this information to those disability groups, to those charities. You know, lots of people are gatekeepers, I do understand that, but it's just about getting it out to those groups of people within your local community, nationally, that can reach them. Because that's one of the hardest things to do. And part of our audience and development plan is going out and physically meeting and communicating and going to events, and meeting the person, because there's a big trust thing, you know, having that one-to-one, seeing the person, we found really, really useful, because we had locally all BSL interpretations. We were trying to communicate that with all the deaf charities throughout, and we weren't, you know, getting the people coming until we reached one person, and that one person was the key. And we had loads all of a sudden attend and come and go, wow, this is brilliant, you know. And so it can be hard work, but it's just keep grafting and keep doing it. If people aren't coming to your event, it's probably because they don't know about it or they don't think it's for them.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. I've made loads of notes. Does anybody have any questions they want to fire in? I can continue to ask my questions. Oh, key word about relaxed performances: welcoming in a genuine, effective and caring way. Not a ticket to enter a dominant culture, brackets able-bodied, neurotypical only, but accessible, comforting. Thank you, Rachel, for your presentation.
No, I think that's the thing that I shout about a lot, is just you need to make people feel welcome, and that they, you know, people can come and see and come and experience, and that's because they're telling me that they don't feel welcome. Because if your needs aren't being met, then you're being ignored and excluded, aren't you? So it's just really thinking about that. And one of the things also about, I suppose, I don't know if it came across as well in the presentation, is that those who suffer from chronic fatigue really struggle, you know. So please think about what you provide in terms of your seats, in your space, somewhere to lie down. Sometimes, you know, the quiet spaces are a lifeline for people. They're not just, oh, that's nice, you've done that, I can have a bit of quiet time. They're lifelines, you know. They're really important things that just, can just be so remarkable. I suppose it's the small things that actually are so remarkably big to people who need them, that if you don't, you'll never really quite understand. But just to listen, people are telling, I suppose it's the kind of thing is when you put people trying to put to understand why. Sometimes you don't need to understand why, you just need to listen and accept it and do that. I think that's also another important thing to think about.
With as you were saying about chronic fatigue and having somewhere to lie down, I think in what you just said there, it was in the quiet spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that? I was just thinking in my head, is that? Should there be a place to lie down within the performance space as well?
Yeah. So I'd mentioned that simple things like bean bags in the auditorium. Obviously, you have to think about where that is best placed, but we had people using them. So they would lie down to watch the performance. So we positioned them in a safe way, but a way that they had a really good view of the stage or where the performance was taking place. And if you're outside, for example, having them again, bean bags or cushions down, you know, people can adapt and can move to those places and have that choice. And you're doing that and you're saying this is okay. So the general public are also learning something about it as well. So I think there's always these little things that come off that you don't realize you do by doing it. So lots of people who do suffer with chronic fatigue and just have to rest, have no choice, they have to rest, get moved on by security guards thinking that they're drunk, or, you know, things like that. They, you know, and the more people can see, you know, this person just needs to lie down because of a health condition, and because people don't leave the house as a result of it and get caught out sometimes. You know, think they've have enough reserves or they've done enough preparing the day before. Like I also have a friend who's a trained dancer who recently talked to me about he can't go on public transport because when his body goes, he goes over and people think he's drunk and he can't physically hold his body up. And sometimes that can be quite instant. So, yeah.
I'm a diabetic, and sometimes if I go low, I look like I'm smashed out my face.
Yeah.
My dad quite often, because my dad's diabetic as well, he often goes low, and in the middle of the day you just think he's a drunk man walking down the street, but he's having a hyper. Lisa?
I was just going to add into that toilets, so as part of relaxed performances. And yeah, there's been a friend of mine at the moment is a little bit unwell and has had more need to have a toilet close by. And there's a lot of conversations around sort of traditional spaces, aren't there? And what can be done to make that feel more relaxed for people that that perhaps need it. So I've been doing some thinking around that just this morning, and having a chair or chairs that are in positions that it's then easier to leave the space. But I think it feeds into a lot of what's been said across this morning around just making it clear that the space is relaxed makes somebody feel like they can get up during the middle of a play and it not be an issue. And I feel like these conversations are so important, aren't they? And yeah, I just kind of felt I wanted to add that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and there are some things which are making that a lot harder, like toilets being locked at certain times of the day, and you know, it's having quite a big impact on people, or a child who can't hold themselves to run to a different place. I've had a few experiences on holiday recently, which hasn't been great, but yeah. It's really important. It's basically, you just got to think about as many different things as possible and go, you know, how can I just make it enjoyable for people, you know, and not, you know, I think we're far enough into thinking about diversity and people and that we're not all the same now, to know that, like, for example, a lot of the feedback I get from the dancers is like, you know, you really make me think, because every body is very different, but unless it's got a label of having a disability, it's expected to do a certain thing, and you know, it physically isn't. So it's the acceptance is everything's growing, I think, and understanding's growing, which is really helpful. But there's still lots of ignorance and exclusion happening as well.
I think that's one of those things I've been thinking a lot, particularly in this conversation, but some of the previous conversations. And partly today, like in your talk today, I was thinking about my previous shows and previous festivals, and it's like, how many people have I negatively affected? Just simply because I didn't know about those things. Like I didn't have an awareness of loud music, the sort of complexities of loud music, really. I sort of, my understanding of strobe lighting, it was mainly around epilepsy and the effects it has on that. But I'm through each of these weeks, I'm learning and learning. And yeah, I just wonder though, because for just thinking about my show, just to use as an example, at the end with the technician, I'm always saying, oh, we need to make the music louder, like, and artistically it kind of feels important because it's the big sing along at the end which rouses the audience and gets them up on their feet. But at the same time, I'm trying as best as I can to make it as widely accessible as possible. So in that sort of tricky scenario between what is artistic and what is a need, a requirement, how do you navigate that, I guess? And is it yeah, I guess that is the question. How would you navigate that?
I would, it wouldn't be a thought for me, because I wouldn't do that because of that. I think in terms of when you're choosing that artistic choice with, you've got to, I think we all know when we're makers of work and we're quite vulnerable for people that come to see it. Everybody thinks different things. So like a loud piece of music for somebody might be like, yes, this is exactly what it's needed, could actually be like, oh gosh, that's far too loud at the end. So it's just having to think about, or a reminder. I think it's really important to you as an artist, make the work that's really important to you and how you want to use it. But is it really essential that music goes loud at that point? is it really, really, you know, what does it really make that much of a difference for the audience to experience or not? And maybe test it out on people whose ears are okay. I don't know, to see if it does make any difference. A little testing audience. But I also think, you know, if it's something that really upsets you and is very important to you, you've got to acknowledge and listen to yourself as well, to say, oh yeah, you know, that, you know, how could you problem solve that? You know, it's something important for you, you want to do that, how could you problem solve it?
Could it be about providing ear defenders?
I can't hear, sorry.
Sorry. Could it be about providing ear defenders at the start for people who may be sensitive, and then giving sort of a warning that when this happens, the music might get loud, so if it does become loud, you can put your ear defenders on.
Yeah, or the choice to leave at that point.
And I was thinking about because we've with our festival we've put music in public spaces, which is sometimes very loud. And that was one of the things where I was like, oh my God, how many people have I created a horrible experience of that shopping centre of? So I guess in advance of that period, one of the solutions I'm just forming in my head is just making sure that there's signage that makes people aware that music will exist in this space at this short period of time. Because we don't take over a huge part of town. It's a tiny little spot where you'll go to Tesco or Greggs, but you won't miss much else other than that.
If it's outside and not inside a building, then noise is received differently, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would just need to think, you be clear, does it really need to be that loud? I think that's a question that you would just seriously need to ask. And you could have that sign up, but you could not ever control somebody who has that sensitivity not to rock up at that point. And you know, it's so things like that, it shouldn't happen, really. I don't think. I think it should be something that's sacrificed as an artist, really, because it causes physical pain.
Yeah. Is there a guideline as to what too loud is? Like, is there a? Because I'm trying to work out what the parameters of. Again, speaking with no knowledge and no lived experience of it, it's hard to work out what too loud is.
There might, I'm not aware of it, but there might be some guideline somewhere that says, you know, this is the volume level that you should have it as. But if you can't hear yourself talking to somebody and you think, God, this music's really loud, or somebody's saying it's loud, it's probably too loud. Well, it is too loud. So you just have to gauge that yourself, really. And like you mentioned, you know, people who do suffer from that from a regular basis, most do wear, you know, quite often are used to wearing ear defenders because they don't even need that added loud of music because of other things that can hear, or things, nuances that they do experience anyway. So yeah, I just think it's a little bit of you now know that's a problem for people, and you know, so it needs to be thought about, and it might be something that you need to change in the way that the loudness that you might need to play, because it's
Yeah, and I think a bit, and maybe that is working with consultants that face that, but to work out what level is not acceptable. Because it's something I'm aware of. I'm still just, I guess, trying to work out a little bit as to what that means practically. Because what I think is an all right level is probably not for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's also the fact of people who are wearing hearing aids. You know, they could be walking past, well, like boom, and again, that's not a great thing, because it's again something which is very, it's not just an uncomfortable, inconvenient thing. It's quite damaging and painful as well to suddenly, you know, and I know that from having participants in my dance sessions, that, you know, sometimes if a music thing just suddenly goes off and it's loud and there's no control over it, it's like, ow, you know. It's I do think the best consultants are the people that you're wanting to engage with and to come. So you know, having the more interaction and you can have with your disabled community locally is the best thing, you know, for them to be involved in all of what you do, to be testers, to be, you know, to doing things, and is something that I would personally recommend.
Yep. And that's an excellent recommendation to finish on, is to engage with the community and the city to ensure that that is embedded in all of our work. We've sadly gone slightly over time with the stimulating conversation. Just to say a huge thank you to Rachel for leading today's talk. It's been really great to hear not only about your festival and your work, but for you to give us such practical thoughts and considerations to be making. I know I've got a lot out of it, so thank you very much for that.
Thanks for inviting me.
Quite all right. And thank you to Lisa for helping with the tech. And thank you all for joining us today. Next week's session is on dementia, making dementia-friendly performances. We'll be joined by Enteleki Arts, and Lisa is going to also share some experience of her work in relation to that. I hope you all have a lovely weekend, and hopefully see you next week.